Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Robert Neir and Siddhant Kasat, two of the four co-founders at Layer3. Layer3 is a research and development studio focused on Web3 building and consulting. Rob and Sid, it's so exciting to chat with you, and especially with the exciting world of Web3 and really a lot of the communities and all this kind of facilitated building and all these processes. It's so nuanced in terms of what we've been familiar with for, I would say, the last 10 years of technology, and now we're able to really kind of, obviously there's a bunch of innovation, there's a bunch of movement in this space, but it's more fascinating to think about the communities and how there's this kind of open source type of concept around building and creating amazing, whether it's apps, protocols, or whether it's web-based apps or even phone-based apps as well, and what that even means for the grander space and where it's going to reach consumers at some point. But before we get started, I'm going to go with you, Rob, first. What were you doing before you started the company?
Yeah, I was actually working at Microsoft as a video game developer, and I've been programming video games for many years throughout middle school and high school, and also just generic other types of programming as well. But yeah, I was working on Forza at Microsoft at the time, and then quit directly from there and started at Layer 3 with Sid.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Sid, tell us about your journey. What got you fascinated about the project and what got you particularly interested in joining Rob and the other founders on this journey to start building out Layer 3?
Yeah, for sure. So my background is in computer science, and I've always been like super interested about like emerging technology, like blockchain, starting like 2016. Had worked on student organizations, and then while I was working at a big tech company, I found Rob, and we were just like discussing like different ideas, like, hey, let's explore this together. We'd love to like build out like a product with you, and then we kind of like jumped straight in.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about how co-founders meet and connect and start building out. And the initial building process is so fascinating because it takes a lot of, strategy, brainstorming, a lot of different ways to find the problem set and then start to build towards that. And I'll go to you, Rob, first. How are you in particular thinking about what you wanted to tackle with the Web3 space, and how you essentially care to kind of strategically go after the problem set and what you were looking to solve and build and start building this community around the technology?
Yeah. At first, it kind of more started what can we do successfully, we think, at like what scale versus what's the end goal. I think we were just trying to build something that somebody would use. So we were like, let's, because we both had full-time jobs. We all had full-time jobs. And we were like, we don't have too much time to dedicate to this. So with the time that we have, let's build something, even if it's really small and not that useful to the Web3 society, just so we can get our foot in the door. So that was the first idea. And it ended up being an NFT project that was essentially your classic NFT project on OpenSea, like percentage traits, images that were profile pictures that you could buy, and not much of a contribution to the DeFi space. Like there's a bajillion of those. Some of them have a lot more impact than others because of the timing in which they were released.
Sure.
But that was our first go at it. Do you want me to continue past that?
No. Yeah, no, yeah, that was a solid answer. And I'm curious,
Okay.
shifting it to Sid a little bit. And when you started, Rob kind of starts talking about breaking into the space, building, and starting to just get your foot in the door. What did you see that was particularly unique, Sid, in terms of the technology that had not been seen before? And what kind of components did you have to really bring together to get the full idea around what it really means and to build in Web3? And a lot of people think like you have to mint a coin and then all of a sudden you have to use that, tokenize and create this whole system. But recently, we're obviously seeing that a lot of the larger, say, Polygon and other foundations have a lot of tools to be able to connect with them. What's particularly unique about the space that you saw, and what did that initial build lead you to kind of believe and start to utilize on the team and when you started building other projects?
Yeah, for sure. So that's a loaded question. So I'll break it down into like two parts. The first part being how did we start and like what did we see in this space? As Rob mentioned, like we were all kind of like just wanting to do a project together, see like what the space is about. We had all been in the space. Like I was a blockchain developer. A couple of our co-founders have been like doing DeFi for the last 3 years. So everybody like knew this space. Everybody had like experience with projects and protocols. So the first thing that we learned was managing communities. Like I feel like Web3 is all about a community. Like we spent hours on Discord managing people, managing like people's expectations, questions. It was
Yeah.
fun. It was hectic, but it was fun. So that's the first big thing that we learned in the last 2.5, 3 years that we've been working together. We've seen like the space like grow and like mature, where we're like kind of like more focused on like adoption, more like mass adoption in a way. How do we make it easier for the end users? That was always not the plan when we started. Like it was like, hey, get whoever is using DeFi or like crypto today, how do we get them using our project? But now it's more like, okay, how do we get like the next like million users, next billion users, without having to like go through the whole process of like a setup, get a coin and whatnot? How do we make that easier for them?
Yeah. And thinking about that whole community aspect that Sid just brought up, it is so critical to a lot of companies building in this space. And describe why that is, and also what kind of almost superpowers do you gain having a community of people around in your product, building, and then really just getting an insight to how to iterate quickly on things that are useful, not useful, and to continue to foster that community. What do you think about fostering that community? What strategies do you use, and how critical is it to your business and what you look to pursue and build further?
Yeah, I've always thought of a strong community as like your hedge against a bear market. Like having a really good community has pushed so many projects through bad times,
Yeah.
and also has made the projects during good times excel.
Yeah.
I'd say that is a lot because these people put a lot of energy into your product. They use it every day. They're probably the best people to ask when it comes to what would you improve, what other features would you like to see. And so, yeah, these communities are extremely important. It's good to get one started before launching a project. I think people often make the mistake of
Yeah.
thinking if I make something really cool, people or useful, people are really going to want to come use it right away. But the community aspect is probably more important, and getting marketing out there and people understanding what you're doing, not just, hey, this is really cool. Because the tech is also very new.
Right.
I'm going on a little bit of a tangent now, but the tech is really new, and it's tough to explain some kind of tokenomics to people. I am not the tokenomics expert on our team, and half the stuff that we talk about, Sid can tell you, just goes right over my head. I need 10 times explanation. We have other people on the team who are really good at that. One of them is named Hisham. He's not on the call right now, but he's basically the tokenomics expert and DeFi expert on our team. So anything DeFi he handles. Anyway, yeah, communities are important. Bear markets, they'll get you through them.
Yeah.
And they're the best people to ask when you need feedback on things.
Yeah, and just to ask you a follow-up question there before we head to Sid, is how does it kind of help you with the community? It's like they're involved in the building process. They're involved in kind of their direction for a lot of the different products you're building through this. How do you think of utilizing that ecosystem and then doing something different where it's like adopting and getting more users on it and really putting these products out to get more feedback? How is that different than, say, like working at a traditional SaaS company or working at a company that has a particular service or product, whereas it got a very clear direction, clear vision, whereas I think a lot of the beauty of Web3 is the experimentation and seeing what actually works. How do you view kind of that process, and whether it's building partnerships or getting new users to troubleshoot things?
So one thing that you asked Julian was about like the feedback aspect of it, right? Like this is a big proponent or like a change that we have seen where in a bigger enterprise or like a SaaS company, as you mentioned, it is difficult to get your feedback across. Like you don't know what the priority is going to be. As a Web3 company, you have a whole like roadmap planned out. People can give feedback. There is voting. There is much more transparency. Like you get to like see like the projects like treasury. All of that stuff is super open and like it's kind of like governed by the community in a way. So that's one big thing that we see. The other point that you mentioned was about partnerships. We felt that was a big kind of like change in scenery where let's say you want to like talk to a company in Web2, you have to know somebody at the company. You have to like put in a lot of effort to just get in touch with somebody at a big company. Whereas with Web3 projects, like I can reach out to like a CEO of like a Web3 project like instantly. People are there on Twitter, on Telegram, Discord. It's just amazing, like the change that has happened in terms of like communication and like what the community wants.
Yeah. And what would you both say would be like the common trends for what people are looking to build? Is it all fintech products that are adjacent from Web2 products that are servicing and just kind of transitioning Is it consumer products? What in particular are you seeing a lot of just quick adaptation in terms of the transition from Web3 to Web2 to Web3 and the types of products people are looking to actually build in the ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. So,
Sorry, go for it.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, number one, yeah, fintech is probably the most obvious use case. I think everybody would agree on that one. Not having a middleman is huge when it comes to any kind of financial transaction. So that's number one. Sid and I and Layer3 has started to explore. We explored that space for a bit. We got pretty good at that area, and we wanted to expand the horizon and see what else Web3 had to offer. So Sid is more well versed than I am in this, but I'll start. We're looking and building in the DID and decentralized identity space.
Yeah.
So we hope that Web3 can become a useful tool in that space. Yeah. We're banking on it. We're trying. You got to try. Working with other DID builders, people building in the decentralized identity space, and we're trying to find real use cases right now. Find a way to make money doing it as well, because you have to actually survive, right? While also providing value. So that's kind of where we're at, and we've identified a few things. I'll stop there, though. Sid, do you want to add anything else?
No, I think you covered most of it. One thing I would add in like the DeFi or the finance sector, the fintech sector, is like the change of like the speed, like not relying on central like organizations. Let's say we did like a transfer, like a Swift transfer like last week, and it took like 8 days to get to like the other country, and I'm like, that is insanely slow. Like we're so used to crypto, like it doesn't even feel like real. So yeah, just like that change is gonna like happen, like less reliance on like central like authorities or central like governments is like needed.
Yeah.
And touching upon like the second part that Rob mentioned is the problem in the space of like verification. Like today on LinkedIn, if you go and if you put like a job, like, hey, I worked at Beyond Company Lines, there is no way to verify. Like you can't, like you as a company can't even go in and say like, hey, this person did not work at my company.
Yeah. For example, we have 4 people working at Layer3 right now on LinkedIn who don't work at Layer3.
Is that right?
Like we have. Yeah. Anyway, keep going, Sid. Yeah.
No, but how do you verify that? Like how do you get like the authority to revoke somebody's like experience, but at the same time, like you not being a bad actor? So this is where like we are kind of like delving into like the space of verifiable credentials and DIDs, as Rob mentioned.
Yeah. Rob, you were going to add something, I think, but I'm particularly interested in the access to like new technology. And what I mean by that is it seems like previously, before, say, open source, there was a lot of gatekeeping for whether it's API protocols or really tying in other technology into, say, a platform play or anything that kind of centralizes, for lack of a better term, a lot of different technologies start to build on top of. What has Web3 changed in terms of the velocity that you can really build at, and with this kind of fundamental philosophy that everything is going to be shared, all the information is going to be shared? What does that change in terms of the speed, and how quickly is technology evolving in this space that we just haven't seen before? For those of us who don't know.
Sid, you want to take the tech speed question?
Yeah, for sure. That's a big one, Julian, that you touched upon, because Web3 is all open source. Like every project has their core contracts. Most of them have their UIs like open. Yeah. And this is a big shift from like Web2. And like the speed, as you mentioned, like if you release your project today, you open like your UI and like your smart contracts. In 2 weeks, like if your project is doing well, you will see 20 different like forks and clones of your project, just reskinned, renamed, everything like new on like a different chain or like just doing something. But with that, it actually enables more innovation, because maybe you missed something, maybe there was a gap in your model that somebody else caught, and then they have like kind of like tweaked it to make better. So we've seen like this with one of the projects that was released. They released a very crude version. Like the idea was cool, but there were a lot of like bugs and gaps and like the whole thinking. So a lot of projects have gone through like multiple iterations, and I think like we're at like the 5th generation of like iteration in just like, I would say like 6 months, and like every iteration has just gone like better and better in terms of like of that project's like essence.
Yeah. And Rob, what do you think this means in terms of when you think about, you mentioned monetizing, and I don't think a lot of us understand kind of the mechanics behind being able to run a company, build with developers, have everybody kind of involved in this ecosystem, manage a community. But how do you keep the lights on as a Web3 company building in this space? What is extremely unique about the structure of a Web3 company in the sense that you are able to monetize based on community output, work, all these different things that traditionally it was like, go get clients, have them pay for your product, and then scale that as high as you can. How do you kind of, how would you describe that to the mechanics behind that for us that don't know?
Yeah, I mean, you're a lot more free to decide how you want to make money on your protocol you're building. You could literally go the old classic Web2 route if you really wanted to do something subscription like.
Yeah.
But what people usually do a lot from what I've seen, and Sid, you can correct me here, I'm not the DeFi expert on our team, but people usually skim fees off of things. Like if you're exchanging tokens, right, you'll skim a fee. If you're depositing into a vault, you'll take a deposit fee, a withdrawal fee. But the one thing that I think is extremely interesting about what Web3 offers that Web2 doesn't offer when it comes to revenue models is the sharing aspect of it. You can really create some new types of incentives for users of your protocol or your project where you can give them a portion of for your earning. So it's almost like everybody is earning together or succeeding together. And that really ties in extremely well with DAOs, because if no one's owning the protocol, whose bank is this going into? Who's earning all this money, right? It's nice if you're a token holder, you're like an equity stakeholder in, let's say, a Web2 company where you earn X amount from profits from the company or something like that, like a payout or a dividend. Same kind of thing with Web3 now, but it's applied to DAOs, and you can buy into that really easily, even without being. This is the whole regulatory part, like without being an accredited investor.
Yeah.
You can get access to these interesting projects. And if you are smart enough to read through the docs, you have a computer science background, you can understand, hey, this tokenomics model actually seems sustainable. And these people aren't just another classic boom bust ICO project. You can invest in something like that. And that's the coolest thing, I think. Personally, Sid, you can add to that if you want, but in the Web3 space versus Web2.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about the traction of Layer 3. So you've been working on quite a few different projects. You said you did a lot of work in the financial space, and now you're looking to transition. What's been exciting about the traction you've had thus far in terms of how many people are building on it, how big the community, how many users, and then also what's particularly exciting about the next chapter of Layer 3 and what you're aiming to build and continue that progress. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Sid, do you want me to tell them like the structure of
Good.
Layer 3 real quick, and then do you want to talk about Gatekeeper a little bit?
Yeah, good.
Okay, so I mean, I'll just jump in real quick to start. So Layer 3, we've worked on a lot of different projects, and the current focus for us is a project called Gatekeeper that we built internally. When we started Layer 3 at first, we thought we would be a Web3 consulting because of our experience for the past 2 years in Web3 business and development firm, alongside being an R&D firm, building new ideas, coming up with things, building them, trying them out, seeing if investors want to invest, seeing if we can raise money through what I was talking about with this sharing stuff with like DAOs, right, and community members. So right now we're working on a project called Gatekeeper, which is in the decentralized identity space, and our model is kind of we're building in Web3, but our model for revenue is more towards, I'd say, Web2. Anyway, I'll stop there, and Sid can talk about traction for Gatekeeper specifically and like how we're feeling about it in the space.
Yeah. So Layer 3's, I guess, journey kind of like we went through like multiple clients. We felt like it was cool to like work on different projects, but we always had that itch to like work on our own idea and like our own project. So we kind of like have stopped like taking like on like more client projects, and we have all kind of like focused on our internal project, which is Gatekeeper. And it's been fun. Like we've been building for the last 5 months, like doing this day and night. And it's just kind of like a Web 2.5 product. Like it's not just Web 3, not just Web 2. It kind of like ties both worlds together. It's kind of like an aggregator platform for access controls and identity points. So like, let's say beyond company lines, if you want to only give access to people like who are paying like a subscription or who hold like a Julian NFT, you can gate this podcast pretty easily from people to like listening to it. This way, like we're helping creators monetize their own work. We can help like give access to like exclusive products. Like maybe I'm like a listener of your podcast for like 10 videos in a row. I get like a hot streak. I get like a exclusive merch that I can buy from your store. Could apply in multiple places, but the idea is giving more to the identity like data point, and like not selling of like the data point. So like the user is still in control of like their own data, like moving forward.
Yeah, and Sid, I know you have to jump into a second here. So just to double up on this on this next question is how does the identity fence is so fascinating Web3, being that you can validate, and also the whole idea behind you can kind of opt in your information to then be monetized or utilized by the application, and kind of maybe they're training AI models to really understand your user preferences and things like that, and then you can collaborate between different brands. How was it done before in terms of identifying the different points of proof for that individual, and what does the change really mean for people wanting to own their own data and validate their identity and really kind of avoid any bad actors who want to steal their information? How does that level of security and sophistication come with the Web3 in that whole transition?
Yeah, for sure. So the like take an example of like Ticketmaster. We take this to explain this super easily. Let's say Taylor Swift concert tickets went live. Like 80-90% of them were bought it, and they were bought by scalpers, and like nobody, like not a fan could like get in on like those tickets. And that's like a huge problem because that's creating like a secondary market. That is the easy way to stop it is like, let's say Ticketmaster could have given early access to, let's say, top 1% fans on Spotify for Taylor Swift. This means early fans would get like early access to get in, and like the users' data. Like the problem over here is there's two big Web2 companies, like two giants, and they don't want to like share like data across. And this is where like Web3 is connecting both those platforms, because Spotify could issue like these NFTs, verifiable credentials. Hey, I'm a Swiftie. Now I just go on to Ticketmaster and I verify, like, hey, I'm a Swiftie. I hold this from Spotify. Give me early access to purchase this ticket. So it's connecting like bigger enterprises who normally wouldn't share this data across. So yeah, that's one gap that we are seeing that we're trying to solve. There is the aspect of security, like the data privacy part of it. I won't go into too much details, but it's all kind of like using like new technology like zero knowledge proofs and cryptography to kind of like hold the user data within like with ourselves rather than storing it and submitting it to like some other company.
Yeah. And Sid, I know you have to jump for us in a second here. So real quick, is there anything about Layer 3 that the audience should know that you're particularly excited about? Something that to just train our eye or keep our ear out for something you're building, any updates or anything cool that we should be aware of?
Yeah, for sure. So Gatekeeper is our current project, and we are starting to kind of like go live pretty soon, onboard like people. Hope to see like Gatekeeper's like access controls being used in multiple places. That's kind of like our focus right now.
Amazing. It was such a pleasure having you. If you have to jump, such a pleasure having your time, and we'll make sure to share this and let everybody know what you're working on. Appreciate that, Sid.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks
All
so
right.
much, Julian. Nice job.
Get out of here, Sid.
Rob, back to you. I'm thinking about external factors, thinking about internal. What are some of the biggest risks that Layer 3 faces today?
The number one thing is funding.
Yeah.
So we have been self-funded since day one. Like we've been funding our own thing, and from revenue we've made from previous ventures, we've built up a treasury. Treasury has a certain lifespan, certain runway, and so we are a startup, and we're not currently making any money from our product that we're building.
Yeah.
But we do think it has potential, so we're betting on it, right? So that's the existential threat that exists. But at the same time, I don't think I'd change it. I think we're learning a ton from this. Like I have never had some of the conversations before in my life that we've had in the past like three months or so, needing to get rid. It really sucked, but needing to get rid of people who've been with us for 2 years, 2.5 years, trying to be more efficient with the time we have, cutting back on what we think is worth spending time on. But it's really grounded us again, and I think if we were living back in the bull market where everyone was spending on all sorts of stuff, we would kind of still be in that fairyland and mode mentally, where I think even if we had, let's say, 4 times the amount of money that we would have currently today in our treasury, we would probably have burned through it at the same rate. Like we would have scaled up to a point where it was unnecessary because we were so used to it. But now I'm pretty grateful for what we've gone through, because our whole perspective has changed. We pull back on spending and we go, okay, anything that we're spending on, it is extremely deliberate. And so as we scale, I am pretty sure, like I wouldn't do it with anybody else. Our team, we all balance each other out. We hold each other accountable. We're trying to watch out for the budget. And shout outs to our CFO, Zan. He's not on the call right now, but he fought against the other 3 of us when we were trying to spend. He was like, guys, nope, we're not spending. I'm not letting you guys do this. We gotta hold he's gotta hold his ground there, and he did. I'd say if we scaled now, we would do a much better job at scaling than if we had started scaling during the bull market.
It's such a good perspective, and I've heard a lot of founders echo the same thing, which is because of the circumstances really helps you operate at maximum efficiency, keep things lean, and also be super intentional about the other, whether it's resources or tools that you bring in, to really kind of think of what's going to be valuable and what's the ROI of everything you bring in to really be not only operationally effective, but cost effective as well. And thinking about if everything goes well, what's kind of like the long-term vision for the company?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're all pretty like-minded people in that we, in our respective fields, have all built something and like building things, regardless of what field we were in before we worked on Web3 together. And we're all friends in real life as well. And when we talk, like what we get excited about is, hey, we want to be able to come up with a new idea. We want to see if it's worth working on. We want to build it. We want to try it out, go through test runs, iterations, MVP. And I don't think we would want to change doing that regardless of the size that we get to. I don't know if Amazon's a good example. I'm in Seattle right now. Amazon's based here. But I don't know if Amazon's a good example. Maybe it could be. Their slogan is every day is like day one or something like that. It's so corny. But I mean, whatever. It's a good slogan, I guess, right? And so I would like us to not stop building new things, regardless of the product that we end up building. Of course, in this time period, we do need to focus on one thing. And I think we've realized that. We tried to build 2 or 3 products at the same time, actually, and that went horribly wrong. Word of advice to anybody else, any founders trying to build something as a team, multiple things, and don't do it. Don't even bother trying. Focus on one thing. It probably sounds obvious saying out loud, but we didn't think so. We were like, we're an R&D firm. We can build 3 things at once, and then whichever one does better, we'll pursue. But it's it doesn't work that well.
It's like when you're building a company, even if it's a singular product, there's so many ways you can go. Even within that, I assume if you're focusing on other products, it stretches you a little thin in a lot of different ways. But it's hard when you see so much opportunity, so much possibility, and all this new technology. I'm sure is just you're chomping at the bit to actually get involved with it and start using it and learn more about it. I love this next section of the show. I call it my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions, and we'll see what we get. First question is, what's particularly hard about your job?
Relationships. I'd say. So for me, I don't know, somebody else on the team might be different. For me, relationships between everybody on the team and relationships with employees. It's a tough balance, especially with a small team and a remote team. People can feel really isolated, the classic remote stuff. But also just trying to be a normal human when you're talking to somebody over the phone. They're not just your employee. It doesn't. Some people say, yeah, they are. Some founder, I don't know. I don't feel like that. And I feel really responsible for a lot of the people who are working at Layer3 and who were working at Layer3. And it sucks when you know someone for 2 years, you talk to them every day, and then you have to tell them like, yo, we don't have enough money to pay you anymore, and they got to leave. That's the worst. Everybody who has, they're doing great. They're doing fine. They're doing good things. But I would like to be working with them, but that's always a bummer. And you never know if they can come back because people need full-time jobs. They have bills to pay, so they'll go somewhere else. By the time that you can pay them or you have bandwidth, they might not be available.
Yeah.
So relationships, I'd say.
Yeah, and what's particular, you mentioned kind of a common experience a lot of founders talk about, which is just having to hire and fire and being that it's just a lot of stress. It's a lot of different kind of feelings and emotions that come along with it, especially if you've been working so intimately for that amount of time. And what's something that you've learned through that process that you think you're better at, but you wish you were better at earlier on as a founder?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. One thing, actually, let me think. Specifically through the firing and hiring process.
Oh, you can open it up. You can even talk about other things that, in terms of the founder experience, has been extremely valuable to learn.
I'll start with the firing and hiring process and or what I've learned from that. I've learned it's normal. It doesn't feel normal when you do it for the first time because it isn't normal for you. But in the grand scheme of things, it is very normal that kind of thing happens. And to detach yourself a little bit from it and not blame yourself too much, but blame the situation and the circumstances is better. And then also along those lines, not drawing it out and like apologizing like crazy to the person that you have to let go. Just tell them straight up how it is. Right. Having like a why is good. Like we really just don't have bandwidth. If it's because of their performance, then it is because of their performance. You should tell them that. Yeah. One thing I've also learned from that is I think I actually made a mistake on this one the first time I did it, but you need to continually tell people if they're performing poorly before you fire them. You can't just come in and fire somebody being like, hey, you didn't do well, gone. Because they need to have chances to improve. I think I made a mistake. We did let go of somebody, and I think it was my fault in not taking enough of the blame for their performance to the rest of the co-founders. And to me, when I reported them, I was like, hey, this person isn't doing well, but I didn't really tell the person enough.
Sure.
They were doing well throughout the way. Yeah. And then when I ended up firing them, I thought about it more. I was like, man, I actually think like I was the one who didn't help them get any better. I don't think I've told the guys that either actually yet. But ever since then, it wasn't important for them to know at the time, but ever since then, I've been better about giving little check-ins to people.
Yeah. And so it's so important, I feel like, through that learning process, but also it's awesome that you kind of saw the level of impact, I guess you could have with a lot of different touch points and reevaluating their skills or their progress and giving people a chance. I think that's something a lot of founders do learn along the way. And it's awesome to hear that it kind of has created a new perspective for when going through that process. And I'm sure it helps with hiring too, and thinking about who you communicate with and all the things that create a positive ecosystem. I always like to ask this question because I love how founders extract knowledge from anything that they ingest. Whether it's early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most outside of your other co-founders? Because that's just cheating.
Oh, what books or people have influenced me the most? I have a very unique and lucky situation. I'd say my parents influence. Is that a bad answer? I mean, everyone's parents influence them the most, but my parents specifically. So my dad and my mom, they started a business together a long time ago in Hong Kong, actually, of all places. They started a coffee shop in Hong Kong. That's where I was born. And so they ran a coffee shop in Hong Kong. They've started other businesses. They're just very business oriented people. I guess a good lesson that I learned is to try to have someone that you can talk to who's, and it's so basic and such a simple piece of advice, who's gone through it before. Because, for example, you might get into a new space you've never been in. Like for me and the guys, that was law and legal stuff. Yeah. As a developer, no one on our team has touched anything legal related. And I remember the first time that happened, it seemed like the end of the world. We thought we'd have to shut down our project. We thought it was like a bomb went off. And I didn't know who to talk to. And so I called my dad and my mom and I was like, hey, have you guys handled something like this before? Have you heard this from a lawyer before? They go, yeah. We've heard stuff like that. Like, don't worry. Like, don't worry. Go talk to another lawyer and get a second opinion, like a second doctor's opinion. So we did that. That was the first piece of advice they gave me anyway. And ended up getting a new opinion, went down a different path. Everything was fine. But having someone like that is extremely helpful for sure. Yeah. terms of books and other people outside of family, this is my favorite podcast by all time, or by all time, of all time, the All In podcast.
Yeah.
Do you know the All In podcast?
Yeah. Familiar. 100%.
Hands down, any founder who's out there should listen to the All In podcast. I believe that is true.
Yeah.
These four guys, the two Davids, Chamath Palihapitiya and Jason Calacanis, I believe, they run the podcast. They're all friends. They all have very different opinions, different backgrounds. They remind me a lot of a way more intelligent and well-spoken version of our team.
Yeah.
Because we're much younger, we're getting into it, right? And I feel like we were kind of at where they were at in the past, and I'm seeing all these things they've done, they've experienced. They challenge each other all the time. It's a good podcast to listen to if you want to understand how to have a debate with somebody in a productive way. Sometimes they don't have productive debates, but they call themselves out, and they all have very different opinions, and you can see how maybe working with, even though they're not co-founders at the moment, but working with your co-founders might feel or sound, because you become that close to them, like they're your friends, like these four guys on the All In pod, and they talk about similar topics, and they talk about macro stuff and how that's affecting venture capital, how it's affecting founders, tech, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
I would suggest that podcast to every founder.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, you echo so many similar responses in the fact that you have to have the network of people to be able to rely on in situations where you're unfamiliar, and then also the finding the resource that connects with your current circumstances or experience is money, and it helps guide. Humans love extract the anecdotal knowledge to add to their life. It's awesome to hear that you kind of use those two tools to really kind of take on the difficulties and the growth with being a founder, with working with others, to kind of help expedite maybe a lot of the learning that comes with experience, but you kind of balance that out a little bit more effectively. I know we're coming to the close of the show here, so I always like to ask to make sure that we didn't leave anything on the table. Is there any question that I didn't ask you that I should have, or that you wanted to answer? Anything we left on the table here?
No, you did a great job, man. Yeah, this was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and for Sid.
Appreciate it, Rob. It's so exciting to not only learn about Layer3, what you're building, the different projects that you were working on, but how you've transitioned and how you really focused on the current project and what it really means to the evolution of the product, but also the company and where you are headed and the direction you're looking to go. So the last little bit is, where can we find you? Where can we support the founding group? Give us your plugs. What are your LinkedIns, your Twitters, your website? Where can we be a fan of not only Rob, Sid, and all the other founders, but Web3 and Layer3?
Yeah, I would go to layer3.software. From there, you can kind of see everything we're working on. You can also jump to, I believe, our LinkedIn profiles from there. And we have a Twitter on there. We have a Discord. You can jump into our Discord. It's not extremely lively at the moment. Usually our project Discords, like our specific projects, become more lively versus our business Discord isn't as lively. There's no real reason for people to join that unless they're working with us as partners, right?
Right.
But you can jump in there if you want and ask questions, or follow us on Twitter, and then check out layer3.software.
Amazing, Rob. It's been such a pleasure chatting with both you and Sid, and I hope you enjoyed yourself on Behind Company Lines. But thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you having us on.